Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Anna Pepperdine, and I am the nutrition consultant for Choices Markets at our Kelowna location. My team and I offer complimentary nutrition education in our stores across BC, which you can book through our website. I would also like to mention for those that have attended this seminar that you are eligible for a nutrition buck, which is a $10 off coupon when you spend $50 or more. A survey link will be sent out to you at the end of this seminar, where you will have to select your preferred location, and there you can pick up this nutrition box in 30 days. So now I'd like to introduce our speaker, Jerry. Jerry is the head of education at Host Defense Mushrooms and a mushroom expert extraordinaire. He has been teaching and speaking on anatomy and physiology, herb-drug interactions, and psychology for over 2 decades and holds numerous certifications and postgraduate credentials. Before we begin, I would like to ask you if you have any questions during the presentation, feel free to enter them in the chat box and they will be answered at the end. Thank you so much, and I'll hand it over to Jerry.
Hey everyone, thank you for creating some time in your week to join me on the webinar here. And we're going to focus on fighting stress and supporting adaptation with mushrooms. And we really like to just start these with a general disclaimer that Host Defense products are not intended to diagnose, treat, prevent, cure illness or disease. If you do have a particular health issue or concern, it can be really helpful to work with an integrative healthcare practitioner. The main purpose of having these really is to increase people's understanding and awareness of how the body works and how to utilize a holistic approach to health and wellness. So I'll be going over a whole range of things. And just to reinforce what was already said, my name is Jerry Angelini. I have a Master's of Science in Rehabilitation Counseling and Medicine, and I did my undergraduate and graduate work at Boston University. I have trained in Western Ayurveda and traditional Chinese medicine. Over the years, I've participated in a number of different body-centered approaches to health and wellness, including Tai Chi and Qigong and some yoga. And I've had a private practice for over 35 years. I still have one, even though I've been with Host Defense Mushrooms for about 12 years now. I still have a very small private practice, but sometimes, you build relationships with people, and sometimes, as you whittle down your private practice, people don't want to let go. And, we help people try and figure out better potential options for them, but sometimes they're just like, no, I really want to continue working with you. And so we create that space, and it's really wonderful to maintain some of those long-term relationships with people. What we're going to talk about today, we're going to look at just how stressed we are, and we'll focus on Canadian statistics, but know that this is all over the world. Everyone is super stressed right now. We're going to talk about how stress impacts our health and wellness, and then we're going to talk about adaptogens and how they're different from things like stimulants, right? And adaptogens can play a really important role in working with and managing stress, and then thriving in our day-to-day life. I'll talk a little bit about host defense mushrooms, and then I'll talk about some of those individual species and some of the formulas that can be helpful too. All right, so stress. Yes, everyone is stressed. And one of the things that Health Canada has been participating in is year over year demographic data and questionnaires to see, in fact, how people are faring. And in one particular study of over 1,200 Canadians, 40% reported that they felt more stressed than they did the year before. So this came out in November. So we're talking, 2021 to 2022 instead of 2022 to the end of 2023. So people are still feeling more stressed. And this is after we're all out of the pandemic too, right? So like this is after we came back into the world and now we're more stressed. 40% said they were less, I mean, as stressed, and 13% said that they were less stressed. That's not a good number. That's really, really low. What I find particularly interesting is the questions they asked about how do you perceive other people? Because sometimes we're not the best reporters, right? Sometimes we think we're doing okay when someone outside looks at us and say, "Oh no, you're a hot mess right now." So like right? Sometimes it's in fact more accurate to get other people's assessment of us. And here, 58% of the respondees said that people are more stressed. Only 28% said that they were as stressed, and only 6% said other people were less stressed. That's really not good at all. We also found that 3 out of 4 average adults, like just your regular adults, report that work was a part of their stress in their life. And that's not new information. Like oftentimes that's the definition of work, right? It's stressful. There are deadlines that you have to adhere to. There are demands and responsibilities, and that can create some stress. So that's not a big surprise at all. What is a surprise is why. So pre-pandemic, work and finances. That makes a lot of sense, right? Post-pandemic, now like on the top of people's lists is viral, not just pandemics, but just viral exposures in general. So it's not just COVID, it's also RSV and it's influenza and even like to a growing extent shingles, right? So these are all really significant concerns, more so now than ever before. Isolation is a concern and a focus of stress. And that's something like we never experienced anything like the shutdown in our history. Like, really, we could potentially, hypothetically suggest that never in the history of humanity did we experience the level of isolation that we experienced during that shutdown pandemic experience worldwide. Like people were actually locked in their apartments, like especially in China by the officials. Like that's kind of scary, right? Work is still part of it. Economic uncertainty and an increased cost of living, definitely a point of stress for many people. And now racial tensions and even the environment. So we've got a lot more that is like uh, like creates stress and concern for the average individual on a day-to-day basis. And this is also really important because historically, like if you go back about 5 or 10,000 years, right? The stress people felt was really acute, and it was typically due to some kind of physical potential trauma or attack, right? So most of the time, it was that fight or flight response we had when coming face to face with, the local saber-toothed tiger or woolly mammoth or cave bear, right? So we had these predators that we were really concerned about. And if we were exposed to them and saw them and our brain was like, oh, wow, we're in trouble. We need to run, right? Or we need to face this thing and fight. Because if we try and run, it's going to run us down and kill us, right? So that's the fight or flight response. There's also a freeze or faint as part of it. Also, neighboring groups of people or tribes or nations that were hostile. Those were also causes of stress. Sometimes food scarcity was also a source of stress. Today, our sources of stress are not as acute as they once were. They're more chronic and long term. There's always the concern, like, it's a snowy night, there's a car that's careening at you, and you're like, oh my God, there's a car coming right for me, and I'm not sure I can avoid it, right? That's an immediate stressor for sure. But we also have the more chronic ones like financial insecurity. Can I pay my rent this month? Are we going to be able to afford food for everyone? In the States, it's health related, right? If you don't have health insurance, you're in trouble, right? So these are some of those chronic long-term stressors. Work, like if you have significant like deadlines and stressors over time, the chronicity of stress impacts our body in a really negative way. So stress is associated with the autonomic nervous system, and there are two aspects to the autonomic nervous system. These are all of the automatic functions like breathing and heart rate and digestive processes, even sweating. You've got the sympathetic nervous system, and that like ramps your nervous system up. And you'll notice there are things like airways and sweat glands and adrenal glands and digestive system. The parasympathetic nervous system calms everything down. So this is really important. The sympathetic is the up ramp. The parasympathetic nervous system is the down ramp. And in particular, we have a couple of glands called the adrenal glands. These are particularly tied in with the sympathetic nervous system, but this is the hormonal aspect that's associated with stress. The adrenal glands secrete a number of different hormones, but the ones most related to stress are adrenaline, right, and cortisol. I'm going to back up for a second. I'm going to touch base for just a second on adrenaline because adrenaline is really an interesting hormone, right? It gives us that zip that we're hoping to have as we go through life because it provides us with a sense of vitality or vigor. The challenge is that adrenaline is really in our body to help us run away or fight off that physical threat that comes at us. And what it does is it creates a lot of tension in the body, but it also dilates the capillaries so that peripheral vasculature. And the reason it does that is because if we were to get cut or, attacked or bitten or something like that by a predator, those capillaries are already really dilated, and so it will reduce blood loss under those circumstances. But long term, it can really be problematic because it also like decreases our circulatory system functioning. Um, adrenaline is a close molecular structure to caffeine and nicotine. So we would call them mimics. And we know that caffeine is something that lots of us do. Like we have the coffee or the tea in the morning or sometimes in the afternoon, sometimes even in the evening. But one of the things that we need to realize is that caffeine has a really long half-life. So it takes about 12 or 14 hours to um, metabolize caffeine out of your system. So if you are drinking coffee or tea or have some kind of caffeine like a monster drink late in the afternoon, it could very well reduce your capacity to fall asleep at night because it takes a long time for you to metabolize it out of your system, right? So you've got adrenaline, and then you have cortisol. And cortisol is important in the short run because it redirects how our bodies use carbohydrates and proteins and fats. It reduces inflammation, and people know about this, especially if they've ever had to do prednisone or if they've had to do like a cortisone shot, right? It's an anti-inflammatory. So it suppresses the immune response. It regulates blood pressure. It, in fact, can increase your blood pressure by changing the way your kidneys filter out like sodium and chloride. It can impact your blood sugar level. So if you already have like challenges with your blood sugar levels, whether it's type 1 or type 2 diabetes, cortisol can make that a little bit more challenged. And it impacts your sleep or wake cycle because cortisol has a really specific um, pattern in our bodies. So, at about 4 or 5 in the morning, our bodies and our adrenal glands start to secrete some cortisol, and it slowly wakes us up, and it peaks at about 7 a.m. And that's when we should all be up and awake and alert, right? Because that's one of the things that cortisol does. It boosts your energy and it increases your alertness. And then it starts to drop off after 7 a.m. Until around noonish, and then it starts to pick back up again. And it doesn't go quite as high as what it went to at 7 a.m., but you still get a boost that should peak around 3 or 4 in the afternoon, right? And then after that, it starts to drop off. And it goes pretty low by around 9 or 10 p.m., which is when we should be going to bed, right? And then it stays low because at that point, melatonin in our body is one of the more predominant hormones in our system. And that's what helps us get into a state of sleep and stay in a state of sleep. And then around 4 or 5 a.m., that cortisol level starts to lift again, right? So, on the day-to-day basis, that cortisol, um, that rhythm is really critical. It's part of the circadian rhythm that we all have in our bodies, right? So we don't want to push cortisol, and every time you have stress, cortisol gets pushed through the system. Because remember, your brain is interpreting something as being a threat. And it's the interpretation that's the challenge, right? Even if it's a car coming at us or a predator coming at us, what happens is we perceive something and then it gets interpreted into our brain, right? And over time, what we have done is we've transferred the acute danger that's usually associated with a physical harm to long-term chronic stressors. And our body reacts to it like it's the exact same thing. When cortisol gets pushed for too long, so this is like dysregulated cortisol, we see things like anxiety and depression. That blood sugar level can get really thrown off, right? Blood pressure too can also get really thrown off. Digestion can get really dysregulated, and then it can weaken our immune response. And this is all from long-term higher cortisol levels or dysregulated cortisol levels in our system. It can also wreak havoc with our sleep and wake cycles too. And if we don't get adequate sleep, that further undermines every other aspect here as well. So it's like adding gasoline to a fire. Just a little bit on fatigue, because fatigue is, in fact, a really um, it's a complex process and experience, right? And most people just like, oh, you just need a little more sleep, and oftentimes that's not the case at all, right? There up to 35% of primary care visits are somehow related to fatigue, whether it's the primary issue or the secondary issue. And so oftentimes, a primary care practitioner is going to ask a lot of questions associated with fatigue, like what are you eating and what's your day like, what's your exercise level like, sometimes you have to go through quite a bit of follow-up appointments if fatigue is a primary concern for you. And so, like, things that would be looked at are things like thyroids, chronic or acute infections, autoimmunity, diabetes, even certain medications we know can make people really lethargic. So if all of that's being ruled out, then oftentimes physicians will say, oh, well, maybe you're depressed. And the problem is that it may not be depression, it may be stress, which over a long period of time can have people feeling hopeless and helpless, which then turns into depression. So you've got to kind of take a look. It can be anxiety too, right? So we got to take this kind of holistic approach and get more detailed information. So, if we just give people an antidepressant, it's not going to take care of the chronic stress that they're still experiencing, right? So we do definitely want to have a more holistic approach to this. And then I do also want to touch base a little bit about memories, because remember how I said that the interpretation of whatever you're perceiving is critical in denoting whether this is a this is a real threat or not. You want to think about how different people respond to different situations, right? So one person will see that car careening towards them and they like panic, right? They start to sweat, their palms get sweaty, their heart beats really fast, they start to hyperventilate. And another person is cool as a cucumber and kind of like just avoids that person. And they don't even take, like, it's not even an issue for them, right? So it's the perception of the event that creates that stress response. The key here is that your memories can be as stressful as the original event. And this is where we see things like post-traumatic stress disorder, right? It's when someone has a flashback, they have a memory, and it's so real that they, in fact, feel that exact same stress response, that fight or flight response, right? And they get like the rapid heart rate, the sweaty palms, the palpitations, the panic, all of it, right? And it shuts down their body. So what we want to recognize is that the memories we have can be just as strong at eliciting a fight or flight response as the original experience. Luckily, there's some stuff that we can do about it. So what I love about this, I'm going to start over here on the left. There was a 3-year study that followed stressed out grad students, which is a great group of people to test, right? They're great guinea pigs, right? So, and one of the things we have to remember is that like the undergraduate and graduate schooling is different than high school, right? Because you're typically, for a lot of people, away from home. You may have to work as well as take courses and then take these really challenging exams. And we know that like that student that like has been working all semester along with their studies and post to those exams, they can in fact crash afterwards and get really sick. And that's because that stress is finally released, their immune system is still wonky, and then they get sick, right? Well, here the study also looked at emotional experiences. So the control group is the orange, and you'll see that throughout there was a mild decrease in things like emotional health resilience, which is our capacity to experience a difficulty and then thrive after we've worked through it. Overall outlook on life, and a slight increase in neuroticism, which that's not necessarily a good thing, right? But what we see here, this group of students that were in the intervention arm of the study, they were given mindfulness meditation practices to participate in on a regular basis for those 3 years. And look at the difference here. Like, this is a significant increase in emotional health. a huge jump in resilience and even outlook on life. And there was a really significant drop in neuroticism. And we know that. We know that if you participate with any number of different stress management techniques, whether they're tried and tested or even some of the newer ones, there's really solid research that supports their use for adapting to stressful situations and then, in fact, having greater resilience and emotional health and outlook. One of those is called the relaxation response. And the relaxation response was created by Dr. Herbert Benson in the 70s. He was a Harvard trained cardiologist, and he was trying to figure out like, we have all these people with high blood pressure. Is there anything we can do to help reduce that high blood pressure? And he, in fact, found that by clenching and releasing, so contracting and releasing your muscles, starting at your feet and going all the way up to your head and then down again, while following a certain breathing technique, absolutely shut off your fight or flight mechanism, engaged the parasympathetic nervous system, and reduced blood pressure. Now, there are other practices that you can participate in that function very similarly. Um, Aerobic exercise. Now, that can be just walking 20 minutes a day, right? It could be running after your child, right? Because we all know that's aerobic, right? Weight training. You don't have to push around 1,000 kilos, 10 pounds, like, 5 kilos. Like, work within your limitations and slowly build up over time. Don't push it too hard. The exercise really needs to be moderate, not extreme. In fact, extreme exercise over a long period of time can undermine your immune response and your health, right? So, moderate exercise 3 to 4 times a week is really very effective at reducing our stress response. Tai Chi and Qigong, these are movement meditations. They're martial arts that can shut off our fight or flight response. Pranayama breathing, mindfulness meditation, yoga, these are all tested and tried and true methods to decrease that sympathetic nervous system and engage your rest and digest response. We can also use adaptogens. So at the beginning, I said there was something different between adaptogens and stimulants. And there's a really important difference. Stimulants are things like caffeine and nicotine. And I'm not here to like pass any judgment. That's, I use caffeine, right? I can't drink coffee or tea because they give me a migraine, but I love my chocolate. And chocolate, especially the dark stuff, is what I like. I like 70 to 80% chocolate. Um, that stuff has caffeine in it, right? So, like, we all do it. What we really want to try and figure out is damage control, right? That's actually half of life. Like, how do we control the damage that we create in our own world, right? So, adaptogens aren't stimulants. So, caffeine, nicotine, it pushes adrenaline, it pushes cortisol in your system. Adaptogens, they don't push the adrenaline cortisol response. In fact, many of them reduce cortisol secretion and support day-long energy through other mechanisms in the body. So sometimes it can be increasing oxygenation, sometimes it can be increasing cellular respiration and ATP or energy formation so that your cells have more energy to them. Some of them can be in their antioxidant activity and increasing our recovery rate post-exercise or injury, right? So these adaptogens are things that if we can incorporate them in our day-to-day world, they can help us quite a bit in terms of experiencing vitality and energy in our day-to-day life without pushing cortisol and adrenaline, reducing that fight or flight mechanism and helping us feel more peaceful and even joyful in our life. Okay. The first one I want to talk about is reishi. Reishi is called the mushroom of immortality, or it's called the imperial tonic too, because reishi has been studied and shown to reduce that sympathetic nervous system and engage the parasympathetic nervous system. And this is great, and that's why it's called the Zen choice, right? The great thing about it is it's non-sedating. So it helps us calm down. It like takes us out of that fight or flight mechanism without knocking us out. So that gentle energy that it supports throughout the day can be really helpful, especially if we get to the end of our day and we're pretty tired, right? So daily use of reishi can over time reduce that fight or flight and increase energy. The other thing that is great about reishi is that it seems to have a beneficial impact on many different systems of our body. It supports our digestive tract. It can actually increase the cells that line our digestive tract and support their integrity. It can feed our probiotic microflora, so it's a prebiotic. It can support blood glucose levels already within the normal range, blood lipid levels already within the normal range, and it's our immune system balancer. Another pretty cool thing about reishi is that although it doesn't make us like it doesn't sedate us, it can help us sleep better at night. And why this is really cool is because there's another adaptogen out there, an herbal adaptogen that's very similar, and that's called ashwagandha or Withania somnifera, right? And you take it during the day because it can gently energize you, but it helps you sleep better at night. So if you're already doing ashwagandha, you can supplement it with a little bit of reishi and they can support each other. Because again, sleep is so critical, right? And if we don't get adequate sleep, our cognitive functioning declines, our metabolism gets all out of whack. Really, like just about like every system of the body is negatively impacted by sleep deprivation. So definitely consider reishi if you're have a lot of like fight or flight response triggering in your system, and you kind of want to like energize yourself gently, but still kind of bring your energy back down to a little bit more grounded place. Cordyceps, some people are familiar with this from the athletic world, right? And like there's a lot of research on cordyceps and athletic performance. The reason why we look at cordyceps as an adaptogen is because cordyceps is a revitalizer, and it does it through two very interesting pathways. One, it increases our lung capacity and lung oxygenation. So not just the volume of air, but the amount of oxygen that gets into our blood increases. So that's really important. And in fact, if anyone has any kind of like a challenge with breathing and gracefulness around their lung function, cordyceps is a really great mushroom to consider. But the other way that it helps us as an adaptogen is it supports muscle cell ATP formation. And ATP is like the gasoline for your cells, right? It's the fuel that provides energy for every cellular function. And you know, you think about glucose, which can come from our carbohydrates, right? Glucose is like crude oil. And then when glucose is taken into our cells with the help of insulin, right? that glucose goes into the mitochondria, and the mitochondria break it down and turn it into ATP, which is cellular gasoline, right? And so cordyceps increases mitochondrial function and the formation of ATP. So that's super cool, right? And that's in fact how it helps our body function better under stress, right? More oxygen, better ATP formation. And so if your body is under stress, whether it's athletic stress or even mental stress, right? Because you feel more invigorated by it, it helps your brain function too. You feel more present. And then it does also support healthy libido. And in some cases, it can increase testosterone formation in our body. Not a huge amount, but sometimes just a little bit can be really helpful for different people, right? All right, lion's mane. This is our smart mushroom. It's super cool looking. It's got these little tendrils on it. The human clinical trials associated with lion's mane are really amazing, and it's been shown to help cognitive functioning in people 50 to 80 years old. Now, we do know anecdotally that it does support cognitive function no matter what age you're at. But you got to remember that there's a lot of cognitive degenerative activity that occurs as we get older, right? And that's just being human. It could be genetic, it could be environmental factors, it could be dietary factors. There could be other factors involved, right? But for the most part, we really see that after 45, things start to slowly decrease in terms of our cognitive functioning. So in this group of 50 to 80-year-old men and women, the use of lion's mane significantly increased their cognitive function. What was also interesting about this is a month after they stopped, things started to fall apart again. So the key take home is don't stop your lion's mane, keep taking it. Right? It's also been studied in middle-aged women as well as men and women ranging from mid-30s to mid-60s on weight, mood, and sleep. Now, the weight part, lion's mane didn't seem to impact at all, but the lion's mane did impact mood in a beneficial manner. And it also impacts sleep beneficially. And so, again, it doesn't make you drowsy, but it helps your body sleep better at night. So, really similar to reishi and ashwagandha, right? And the way reishi works is that it helps you fall asleep quicker and stay asleep a little bit longer, about a half an hour, 45 minutes. And lion's mane helps you sleep deeper and a little bit longer, about 45, a half an hour, 45 minutes. Now, some people are like, half an hour, 45 minutes, that's not a lot of time. But it's important to me. I know that sometimes, like, I'll set a second alarm about a half an hour after I set the first one, and wow, that half hour really goes a long way for me, right? So it is important to take that into consideration that sometimes even a half an hour, 45 minutes more can make a huge difference in our cognitive function as we're going throughout the day. Another thing about lion's mane is it's been shown in human clinical trials to support the growth of our probiotic microflora. And that's great too, because we know that our intestinal microflora it can have a huge impact on our long-term health and wellness. And so feeding it food that's a prebiotic for our probiotics like lion's mane is absolutely a positive strategy for having better health and wellness. The other thing, something that I'm going to talk a little bit more about too, is that host defense products, we've been testing our products in a number of different ways. And we're doing this because we want our customers, and me too, like working there, taking this mushroom product, right? We all want to have some confidence that it's really going to do the things that it says it does. So I'm a firm believer in the placebo effect, and that's because if we get our whole mind and body in the process, that's gonna be better. But I'm also going to be paying for things, and I want to make sure that it's also going to have a biological impact on me for sure. And so Host Defense has been studying our products, and we've studied our lion's mane in what's called nerve tissue culture. Now, the reason we haven't done this kind of testing in live humans is because it's really hard to get humans to agree to do like a brain biopsy while they're alive. Like, I don't know, I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense to me because this is all for science, right? So we have to do this testing in cell culture, and we're using human nerve and brain tissue. And what we found is that the lion's main product, which is the mycelium and the fermented rice together, and I'll talk about a little bit more of that in a second or two, it works as effectively as a pure brain-derived neurotropic factor. And so the brain-derived neurotropic factor is one of the growth factors in our body that triggers nerve regenerative activity. And our lion's mane works comparably. So about the same robust strength as it, which is really amazing. We've also done some other compositional testing associated with it. And the mycelium and that fermented brown rice has a set of compounds that have been shown in other studies to support nerve regenerative activity. It's not found in rice that hasn't been fermented by the lion's mane mycelium, and they're not found in the fruit body. They're found in that root structure of the mushroom that host defense uses in our capsules and our powders, and also to a degree in our liquids. So these compounds that have that neurite outgrowth or nerve regenerative activity has been shown to be present in our capsules and powders and even liquids. Okay, turkey tail. So turkey tail is a really robust immune support mushroom. The reason we talk about it here in the stress piece is because if we're super stressed, our immune system can become compromised, right? It gets depressed. And so what we want to do is we want to figure out how we can support our immune response in a really robust manner. So this is the mushroom that we're going to go for. It's going to be turkey tail. It also supports liver detoxification and liver function, and it also has been shown in human clinical trials to support a probiotic microflora. So it is also a prebiotic to support our intestinal microflora. We've done quite a bit of testing on host defense turkey tail. One of the things I want to talk about is this human clinical trial on women who had undergone surgery, chemotherapy, and radiation treatments. And we know that after those, the immune system can pretty much bottom out. It like just pretty much is depressed like pretty significantly. So in this study, 6 grams, that's a lot of mushrooms, right? There's 2 capsules per gram, but we also have the powder now. A teaspoon, a measured teaspoon of the powder is 3 grams. So that would be 2 teaspoons of the powder was used for 2 weeks. So just 2 weeks. The 6 grams got their immune systems back up to pre-treatment activity levels. And that's amazing. And it's also really important too, because one of the most important things that we need if we've been in a situation where we've needed surgery, chemo, and radiation is functional immune cells, right? We don't want anything that might have stuck around to grow out of control again, right? So we want the immune system to have a really robust, what we call surveillance capacity. its ability to see what's going on and to recognize what's us and what's not us too, right? Because oftentimes people post radiation and chemo are really vulnerable to all kinds of infections, bacterial and viral, right? Because their immune system's depressed. So again, we want that immune system to come on board really quick. You can do 6 grams for 2 to 4 weeks just to make sure everything's going good. And then after that month period of time, you can drop back down to like maybe 3 grams, which is 1 measured teaspoon in that powder. And that canister would last you a full month. If you were doing the capsules, you would need to take three three bottles to do that. So that gets really expensive, right? So the powder is really cost effective. In the mushroom industry, sometimes people have heard or read in different places that you need to have one part of the mushroom more than the other. Like some companies talk about the fruit body is the most important. We are at the we're the company that really says the whole mushroom's good. It's not one is better than the other. It's when do you want to use one versus the other? And the reason that is because the whole mushroom has the same cell structure. So the root structure, the mycelium, that cell structure looks exactly the same as the cells in the fruit body. The difference is how organized it is, right? So in the mycelium, it's more web-like in its structure. In the fruit body, it's more compacted and laminated, right? The thing about the fruit body is that's pretty temporary. It can, I mean, you've seen this in your refrigerator, right? You got some mushrooms, you forgot about them, and 2 or 3 weeks later, they look really slimy and they look like they're starting to like rot, right? Because that fruit body doesn't last a long time. The mycelium can last for centuries. And I kid you not, there's a mushroom, like the oldest mushroom on the planet, seems to be located on the eastern uh, face of the Cascade Mountains in Oregon. And it's theorized to be approximately 2,800 years old, which is amazing, right? The mushroom fruit bodies, they come up and then they disintegrate after a couple of years, but that mycelium is huge. It's like 3.5 square miles and almost 3,000 years old. Like that's mind-boggling, right? So what we know is that all of the mushrooms good. But we at Host Defense focus a little bit more on the mycelium because this is where most of the protein synthesis and gene expression happens. So what does that mean? That means it's more metabolically active. There are more compounds that are created and secreted. The mycelium secretes enzymes that will ferment or digest whatever it's growing in. So if it's growing in wood, it breaks down the wood. If it's growing in rice the way we do it, it ferments the rice. And this is a whole another aspect to the host defense products. You have the mycelium and you have that fermented rice with the fermentation metabolites, and what people are now calling postbiotics, right? It's just another term for those fermentation metabolites. And most everyone out there eats some kind of fermented food. It could be yogurt or kefir, it could be kombucha, it could be sauerkraut or miso, it could be pickles, right? Those can be fermented. It could be beer or wine. Those are fermented too, right? They use Saccharomyces, which is a fungal organism to ferment, your malt or to ferment grape juice. And at the end of it, you don't have grape juice anymore. You have wine, and it has a whole set of fermentation metabolites other than alcohol, right? That are also beneficial for your system. And the host defense has a dedicated research team, about 11 or 12 people at this point. I think it's 12 now. We just hired someone. And 5 of those people are PhD scientists on beta glucans and mushroom metabolites, geneticists, like biochemists, like just really brilliant people to help test our products. And like I said earlier, we're doing that testing because we want to make sure the product works. We want to make sure it's effective. So we do in-house and independent laboratory run studies on things like how our immune system responds to host defense products, how our nerve tissue responds to it. And then we also do human clinical trials so we can see, like, what's the toxicity? Are there unsafe levels? And what we found so far is up to 12 grams a day. There's no toxicity and there's no negative interactions. Now, there'll always be the individual out there that's an outlier, right? So there'll always be someone that has a bad response to it. Nothing's for everybody, right? But for the general population, you can take 3, 4.5 grams, even 6 grams a day, and you can have a really beneficial response to it and not have to worry about toxicity. How much do you take? When do you take it? What do you take? So you can do capsules, you can do powders, you can do liquids. And really the general rule here is you buy what you're going to take. I know that sounds funny, right? But think about it. The liquids are like a complex extraction that tastes like mushrooms and alcohol. If you don't like the taste of mushrooms and if you don't like the taste of alcohol, you're not going to use that liquid and you're going to waste your money if you buy it. The capsules, they're, it's the powdered, the heat treated, powdered and dried mushroom mycelium and fermented rice. Um, if you can't swallow capsules, don't do the capsules, right? Because it's a capsule, right? Now, the powders are great. It's the same stuff that's in the capsule, works great on just about any food. Interestingly enough, the flavor of the powder is much more neutral. And that mixes really well with things like your eggs or your oatmeal or applesauce. You can put it in tea or coffee. And I really mean it tastes really neutral. And so it really doesn't have a really, really strong flavor. Now, some people are super tasters, right? And we know they're going to taste everything. But for the most of us, it's really very tolerable. So you got to figure out, am I going to put it in my smoothie in the morning? Am I a capsule person? I'm just going to take my capsules and run. Or do I want that liquid because I'm sick and tired of both of those other things, right? And I tolerate the mushroom flavor really well. You got to work out with what works for you. 2 capsules is a gram, right? And the powders, remember, a half a measured teaspoon is 1.5 grams. That's about 3 capsules, right? And a full measured teaspoon is 3 grams. That would be 6 capsules, right? Right. So when do you take them? Best to take them during the day. Yeah. I mean, especially cordyceps. It's energizing, right? You don't take that at night before you're going to bed. You might take it at night if you've got a night-long drive, like a long drive at night, or if you're going to go out to a club and listen to music and do some dancing, then knock yourself out, take your cordyceps or your cordyceps, have a great night, right? You got about 5 hours. Um, but for the rest of us that maybe want to go to sleep and have to get up the next day, then you're going to want to take them at breakfast and lunch, maybe 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, right? So listen to your body. You may have to, play around a little to figure out what schedule works best for you. But do keep in mind that the energizing quality of these mushrooms can keep you awake at night. You'll see some of our powders. We'll have the reishi powder, the lion's mane powder, turkey tail powder, and then Stamets 7 powder. The cordyceps doesn't have a powder yet in Canada. We just don't have an NPN number for it, but keep your eyes open, and hopefully that will be following fairly soon. All right. Now, there's also sometimes some question as to which of these products do I want to take? Do I want to take Stamets 7 for daily immune support? Do I want to take MycoShield for proactive immune support? Or do I want to take My Community for comprehensive immune support? Right? It's a little confusing for sure. So recognize that we didn't name these like this because we wanted to mess with your minds. We did this because, regulators will only allow us to say certain things on a label. So we were kind of limited. So the daily immune support, it's equal parts of 7 mushrooms. It has cordyceps and reishi and lion's mane. So those 3 that we talked about earlier in depth, it has all 3 of those in there, plus 4 others. So this is going to hit pretty much your whole body, and it can be pretty invigorating too if you're doing the powder at like a half or even a full measured teaspoon. 3 grams, that'll rocket you through your day. And it's going to support all of your other body systems as well, like your lungs and your adrenals and your cardiovascular health and your cognitive functioning and memory and mood and your digestive tract. And it's going to support like your liver health and your kidneys, like really your whole body. So if you're kind of have that, like, I'm not feeling optimal in my life, I'm kind of nudgy right now, and my energy is a little bit down. I'm not really focusing too well. Think about that Stamets 7 because it's going to help the whole body function better. And there's synergy in the mushroom formula. So again, we have tested this and found that the 7 mushrooms together support immune functioning about 30% stronger than the individual species tested separately at the same amount. And that's really cool. That's a true synergy. You get more bang for your buck. So it helps your whole body and you get this really excellent immune support. Now, some people will do better with MycoShield. It's 5 mushrooms. It has turkey tail in there and reishi. It also has agarikon and chaga in there. And it's either peppermint or cinnamon. And it's a throat spray, right? So 2 to 3 sprays, 3 to 4 times a day. And this coats your oral mucosa. And, your oral mucosa, this is the primary portal of entry for pathogens into your body because we breathe it in and out all day long, right? So this is, again, cinnamon or peppermint, 2 to 3 sprays, 3 to 4 times a day. This is going to reinforce your oral mucosal immunity. It may even support dental health and wellness too, right? So we do this one for people that are around a lot of other people. If you're like take public transportation or you work in retail of any kind, or the government where people are constantly coming at you, right? Like MycoShield may be your friend. The comprehensive immune support, My Community, is what you take when you're already down. So like you're sick, you're fighting it off, hop on that My Community. I do 2 capsules 4 to 5 times during the day before 5 p.m. And then I'm going to drink some like gypsy cold care tea and sleepy time tea and, maybe think about things like yarrow and elderflower and elderberry to help with kind of some of those mucousy secretions, right? And maybe help me sleep a little bit better at night too, right? So comprehensive or My Community is what you take when you're already down, right? MycoShield is proactive, especially for our consumer facing or customer facing workers and people. Teachers too. Oh my gosh, like all the kids coming in and out, like with the colds, if you have kids or if you're medical staff too, right? And then Stamets 7 is for just everyone for whole body wellness and for a strong a synergistic immune support. And I just covered this. And so this brings us pretty much close to the end here, which we got to a little bit sooner than I thought. But some of the things that you want to take into consideration about Host Defense and why it's an excellent product and company is because we do grow all of our organic mushrooms. They're all organic in Washington State. And, you know, we were laughing about this in Vancouver today, that's almost local, right? Now, it is in a different country. It's about 4 or 5, hour drive away from Vancouver, but it's almost local. It's really close, right? So we test for identity, purity, composition, and safety. We test our products in human cells and in human clinical trials for efficacy and safety. We also have tested that fermented brown rice, and that has been shown to be immunologically active too. And in a really specific way, it in fact helps our body um, generate new tissue. So it's a tissue generative support, and it helps cool off that immune response after it's done. So it really, the mycelium gets the immune system up and running, working really hard. And the fermented rice kicks in our tissue generative activity and immune pacification activity. So really beautiful research data to support host defense products. And most other mushroom companies out there have not tested their products for efficacy. So you can feel confident that the host defense products will work. And then, if you're not familiar with the owner and founder of Fungi Perfecti and Host Defense Mushrooms, Paul Stamets is our fearless leader, and he is an amazing guy. You can take a look at some of his stuff online at paulstamets.com, I think. But like if you just put in Paul Stamets, a whole bunch of stuff will come up. Super cool. Great way to learn more about Paul, Fungi Perfecti, and Host Defense. And then you can visit our websites too. And we have a Canadian, it's hostdefense.ca. You can go to hostdefense.com, we'll bring you to the US one. But recognize that there's a different product line here in Canada because of Health Canada NPNs and what we've been able to bring into the country at this point in time. It's something that we will continue to work with, and hopefully over time, more and more of the line will come up into Canada itself. But keep your eyes open on hostdefense.ca for that information too. All right, take homes, stress. Think about reishi, think about lion's mane. You can even take them together. They're going to help our mood. They're going to help our parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest. They're going to gently energize us. They're going to help us sleep better. Cordyceps is going to help us invigorate our bodies, right, by increasing lung capacity and oxygenation and ATP formation in our muscles. Turkey tail, Stamets 7, MycoShield, and MyCommunity are our immune supports. Turkey tail, especially after things like chemo and radiation, or, like if you've had it in the past or you're concerned about it, turkey tail is your friend. Stamets 7 is your daily whole body wellness immune support. MycoShield is our proactive people facing immune support. And MyCommunity is what I like to call the big guns when I'm down and I really need to get the immune system engaged. All right. So some great reasons for host defense products and the things that we touched based on today. And with that, I want to say thank you so much for coming and being here and available and present. I think we have some time. We for sure have some time for Q&A. So if you want to type some of those in, um, we'll start fielding those as soon as we get them.
Yes, thank you for that presentation. It was very informative.
Oh, good,
And
good.
we will wait a little bit as we do have a little bit of a lag. So in case people are just typing in their questions and we can answer them. So far, nothing came through during the presentation.
Okay. Do you have any questions? Put you
Oh, you're
on the
putting
spot.
me on the spot.
And
No,
you
I
don't have
don't.
to.
I don't actually. No, I didn't know much about mushrooms before this, so it was a lot
Okay.
of new information for me as well.
Yeah. And that's really the case. Like people have been hearing a lot about mushrooms, especially over the last couple of years. And they're trying to like get more and more information so that they can um they can like figure out, is this going to be a support for me? Now these are supplements, and as a nutritionist, you're working with people on not just the supplements but on your daily dietary intake, right?
Yeah.
And so there are lots of edible mushrooms out there, like the white button mushroom, Portobello's crimini. Those all three are the same mushroom. They're just grown a little different. But shiitake and oyster mushroom and lion's mane is also an edible mushroom. And these are excellent sources of dietary fiber for us. So if you like mushrooms at all, chop those up. You have to saute them though, or cook them, or roast them, or make them in a soup. We don't have the enzymes in our digestive tract that will break down mushroom cell wall membranes. So
Mm.
you gotta cook them, but the longer you cook them, in fact, the better. So you can't overcook mushrooms. So cook them up, and saute them with some onions and garlic if you want, some celery, some carrots, and that can be an amazing base for any kind of addition to um, you know, like a meat or a chicken or turkey or whatever. It can be a great base for a stock, for soup, or even added to other roasted vegetables can be a really wonderful way to get those mushrooms in your daily diet.
Yeah, exactly. We did have a question come through just
Oh,
now.
sweet. Good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So can you take mushroom supplements long term?
Absolutely, yes. In fact, what we find over time is the longer you take them, the more they help rebuild your system. So think about these as like substances to help rebuild our constitutional energy. And when I said that the host defense mushrooms support tissue generative activity, it's really whole body. It helps our cells function better and regenerate tissue more effectively and optimally.
Okay.
Yeah.
That seems to be the only question coming through.
Right.
Let's see. Yeah, I don't see anything else coming through.
Okay.
So thank you so much for your presentation, and
You're
we hope to
most
have
welcome.
you back.
Thank you so much. I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your week. Stay healthy. I know it's the end of February, but like it doesn't really start getting better for another month or so. So,
Yeah.
stay healthy, take your mushrooms, and hopefully you can bring some of the practices of stress management into your day-to-day life.
Yes. And with that, I'm going to end the live stream. Thank you everyone for joining us and listening.